G'day expats, welcome to another episode of Expat Chat, episode 41. I'm joined today with my co-host, mate and work colleague, Brett Evans, Managing Director for the EMEA region. How you going, Brett?
Mate, all well, thanks. All well. And for the folks out there who sees the guy on the left or hears the voice, whether you're on the potties or on the YouTube, my colleague and mate, James Ridley, who is the Managing Director for the Australian office who looks after the APAC region. How's things, mate?
Yeah, mate, it's good. We are just heading into that long weekend with Easter, but gosh, it's starting to heat up back in Australia with obviously everything going on with the forthcoming election. So you're starting to see them beat the street, I guess. They're hitting the pavement, and a lot of the signs are coming out. You're driving around corners, and there's a whole crowd of people waving Labor or Liberals. And God, it's been an interesting start to a lot of their election campaigns, hasn't it?
Mate, it has. And I think it's, we forget how long ago it feels about the last one, because it was pre-pandemic and it was the election that, that was going to be lost and wasn't lost, and, the lid scraped in. So we thought we'd jump on the call today and just talk about, we're getting a lot of questions about can an expat vote at the election. So we thought we'd run through, some of the key components and unpack that. Just for folks out there, we have to do the disclaimer. All information that you hear today should be used for educational, informational purposes only. If you have any questions that are pertaining to you, please speak to a licensed professional like Atlas. Just a quick one too. I copped a bit of flack over the last couple of weeks about my obtuse disclaimers. People said, they're a bit weird. So those who came back to me and gave me that feedback, I've got it back on the straight and narrow. So.
Yeah, that's all right. We'll prepare a bit of text for everyone as well that we'll just read off. We'll make it super vanilla and boring.
That's all right.
That being said, let's kick into it because you're right. I mean, same question. Even last week when we hosted those webinars, did have a few questions around, okay, the election's forthcoming. Should we vote? Can we vote? What does that do to even residency and ties back to Australia? Really good question, to be honest, because we've seen in the past certain cases where the smallest thing has slipped up someone regarding whether they're resident or not. It can be simple as having a membership to sometimes a club, if that's sort of the factor. I think there was one that came around, which was that gun license or something like that.
Sporting shooter in Queensland. To be holding a sporting shooting license, you have to declare that you're a resident of Queensland. And the ATO used that in the High Court. Luckily, the High Court threw it out, which is great. But it just goes to show that there's a chink in the armour.
That's the thing, yeah. I mean, with that case, good example, because a lot of expats won't take things to the High Court and challenge the Commission of Taxation's ruling. And he did take leave for that case, I believe, to really drive this home. But that was a bit more of a big case because it was going to probably set a bit of a legal precedent as well.
Yes.
But I mean, when you look at voting, I mean, Brett, your opinion, and I mean, most of the time expats, they've only left, honestly, short term, 3 to 5 years. That's usually their intended goal, even less, but they stay a lot longer. How do you think that looks in the eyes of the ATO and the Australian government if they're voting?
I guess there's two departments you got to adhere to. The first one, the Australian Electoral Commission, which says you are able to vote. If you have been overseas for greater than 5 years, then you have to apply to vote. They'll grant a one-off approval if they think that you voting is appropriate. For those people who've been overseas for less than 5 years and they're still on the electoral roll, yes, you can vote. So then, as far as the AEC is concerned, you've got a legal voice. And, we have seen a lot of the embassies and a lot of the organisations that do work with Australian expats around the world saying, make sure you're registered to vote if you want to.
Yeah.
On the other side is the ATO side, which is what affects most people. And on the ATO side, we're really coming back to those 4 residency tests, the resides test, the domicile test, the 183 and Commonwealth Super, which is only applicable to diplomats and government officials working overseas in the capacity of working for Canberra. Now, obviously, the domicile test really factors into this. And not that we've ever seen someone lose a case to the ATO because they voted, but if it's a weighted response, if you voted the election, you spent more time in Australia and this and that, and your actions really do start to map into that of an Australian resident, that's where it can bring you undone. Just purely voting on that will not bring you undone, but it could be a culmination of other mitigating factors that sort of lead to that assumption. Me, myself, based in Dubai, family lives here, I've severed ties with Australia. I remove myself from the AEC, like the Australian electoral roll. And the reason being is I just didn't want that extra bit of ammunition should I ever get that tap on the shoulder. Now, do I have a legal entitlement to do it? 100% I do. and that's not a problem with doing that, but it's that devil in the deep blue sea, how fine a line do you want to tread in terms of being a resident or non-resident? Now, where it's interesting is under the new rules that are proposed, and obviously whoever gets in next month, we'll probably see them flow this through Canberra. There's nothing in there about voting. So as long as you spend less than 45 days in Australia, you can vote every year. So that's where we're in that sort of devil in the deep blue sea scenario right now, because the residency test has nothing to do with voting, that sort of stuff. It's just, are you in Australia for greater than 45 days or less than 45 days? And even if you go from 45 to 183, there's still nothing in there about voting. It's the accommodation test, the domicile, the right of abode, the family factor test, and the economic assets test.
Yeah, that's right. So and I mean, when you look at the Board of Taxation's report on and how it fleshes out each of those factors, the Australian accommodation, family, all those sort of things you just mentioned, that none of them have anything to do with, your right to vote or voting. It doesn't tie in at all. So I guess if these new legislation or residency rules are legislated very soon, as of 1 July 2022, then I guess you could still vote. You can still keep yourself in the AEC. Just be mindful that you don't want to miss out on and cop a fine from the AEC because you didn't vote, because you're still on there. If you don't care because you don't have the intention of coming back to Australia anytime soon, and it's highly likely by the time you come back, there's probably going to be a new government in place anyway. You might even just throw away that vote and not even vote, to be honest. But it's very interesting to see the way the campaigns are travelling. You've got Albanese that technically has never been really tested in the public eye compared to Scott Morrison. And I think on day one, he's already...
He tripped over. He tripped over. And
oh my gosh. He forgot what the cash rate was. There was another key figure on, I think, unemployment rate as well, when he was asked questions, and he just had a bit of a moment. I think it happened again about another key issue recently. Scott Morrison, we've got to remember that he has copped it ever since the bushfires 2020. So you could almost say he is pretty match fit to deal with any criticism that's going to be thrown his way, any shade that's going to be thrown his way in the next sort of month. He's already dealt with it, whereas Albanese hasn't. And as I've said before, if Labor want to win, they've just got to shut up. They're not say anything.
Yeah, we said that before, didn't we? You said if Labor keeps their mouth shut.
He's shutting up, but he's shutting up about the wrong things, let's be honest. Just because he can't answer the question.
He can't, and then that's the thing. I think if he could be as quiet as possible between now and, was it the 21st of May, whatever the date is, he's in. If he opens his mouth, and you're spot on when it's that being match fit. When you're sitting on the benches, it's easier, to, I guess, hypothesize how you'd handle a situation. It's different when you're in that situation. And I think that's the biggest. It's like playing Wheel of Fortune or Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. You answer the questions really quickly when you're at home on the couch, but when you're in the hot seat, cameras are on you, people fall to pieces. And I think it's almost a case of Morrison's the lesser of two evils, as opposed to there's not one shining candidate who you think is statesman-like and will govern Australia really well. It's like, okay. It reminds me of, and I might be showing my age here, that movie Brewster's Millions, when he runs a campaign to say, vote for none of the above. That's what I feel like running. We just need to find someone who's got a lot of deep pockets and put up a candidate to vote for no one. And that's where we are right now. I think, when it comes to people's voting, I think expats do want to have a say and do want to let Canberra know how dissatisfied they were with Canberra, how they handled the border closures and Australian expats being locked out of the country. And I'm myself included. I was damn pissed off by that. I could not legally return home, which is just a joke. But whether you take it to the next level and actually physically vote, and if your qualification for a non-residency is grey, do you want to add this to that? If you're black and white, you got no assets in Australia, you just want to vote, and you hardly spend time in Australia, then you may be fine. But it just comes down to a personal decision. There's nothing stopping you voting. If you are greater than, let's say, 5 years, then you can, apply for an exemption to vote for greater than 5 years. But if you've only been overseas for 1 to 5, and you're on the roll, then you can vote. But it's really a personal decision. There's no Excel spreadsheet answer that we can give to folks out there as to whether you do it. Can you do it? Yes. Would you want to do it? That's up to folks out there.
Yeah, I know. I mean, Yeah, I mean, under the old rules, I agree with the fact that, you sort of are keeping ties back with Australia. And again, we are still under those old rules, the 1936 Tax Act. Um, it's a really tough one, but I haven't heard of any private rulings that have purely leaned on the fact that someone has voted
No,
in an election year. So it is something that is just maybe more of just supporting information around, oh, this person's still keeping ties back to Australia, but not sort of the one factor they rely on to say you're a tax resident, not a non-resident. I agree with
exactly.
that. But
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, the residency rules, I really wonder whether they're going to get through 1 July 2022. There's a lot to come under that bridge.
It'll be
What
next. It'll be next financial year. It'll be next financial
yeah,
year.
yeah, I know. I mean, I agree, but it's tough saying that because, when I always reflect on how they went about and approached the main residency exemption, they announced it in the 2017 year. And then, yeah, listen, it took them years to actually bring that through. And then even when they were discussing that legislation in the Senate estimates committee meeting when we were watching that, even the politicians didn't know what was going on or
NFI.
understand. Yeah,
NFI.
it was.
Yeah.
It's just bullshit. But um, what I'm concerned is that they are going to swoop in and say legislate this calendar year. Let's say they swoop in and legislate it in December. But they say, oh, listen, because it was announced in last year's budget, everyone already knew that this was coming. We don't need to give you more warning. And that's essentially what happened with the main residency exemption. They announced in 2017, they legislated December 2019. They gave expats 6 months to make a very difficult decision, and that was it. No reprieve.
Yep.
So that's my concern. They still legislated, say in the current calendar year, but it still applies. But I'm thinking that it'll apply retrospectively. 1 July 2022, there's when it would apply that year. And they'll just say, too bad we announced it last year. You should have been aware of it, and off we go.
And depends on too, in the Border Taxation's report, they did recommend a 12 to 24 month implementation period. So let's say it's 2 years and they announced it in the 2021 budget. So technically, if they want to push it out, it may not apply till next year. Like there's so many different variables here, and
I agree.
we really need to see that. Yeah, we need to see that implemented. Yeah, and they talked about grandfathering and opt-in and all these different scenarios that people could apply. But once again, the devil's in the detail in that explanatory memorandum. We need that. We're desperate for that because people right now are trying to make decisions, and it's based on a 2-page report from last year.
Yeah, well, I mean, the recommendations, there's things that they really need to flesh out under those four factor tests. They also need to flesh out the provision around the tiebreaker rules when there's a tax treaty in play with another country. That's actually a really important one because if they don't provide further guidance on that, it means that 45-day rule is a hard line. Whereas if you're in a country that has a really good DTA with Australia, and I mean really good that it's just very clear and easy to understand, then you might be able to go over the 45 days. But we don't know that because we haven't seen an explanatory memorandum, which should be, 8 to 32 pages long or something that sort of lays out everything under all the different tests. Very frustrating.
A lot of gaps. And to me, yeah, like I said in our webinars and seminars for the budget update, man, I asked Santa Claus for a 60 or 90-day period on the changes. We'll see whether Santa. We'll see whether Santa delivers. But to me, yeah, it is like blowing in the wind and see which way the wind blows at the moment because you raise a very good point about their approach to MRE, saying, oh no, we gave you guys warning in 2020 and 2021, and you knew about it. It's the execution really. That's the one that really concerns me and how that plays out. So, mate, I think we wrap up it there, but voting's a bit of a yawn event for most expats and Australians in general, and sort of the donkey votes in Australian pastime that everyone loves to use. To me, I think we've answered the question pretty succinctly. You can, but do you? It's a personal decision, and watch this space in terms of more regulatory updates because they're going to come thick and fast.
I know. I'm not looking forward to going to the voting polls in May because there's not a lot of people that I like that are in office, to be honest. I think that's the sentiment that's shared by many Australians right now.
Mate, I think donkey votes will be a record high.
I think so. I happen to agree. Google donkey boats if you're not sure what it is. Anyway,
we'll wrap it up there,
right,
mate. So, and thanhanks for everyone who attended, obviously, the webinars and seminars over the last week. We hope you guys found it of value. We had, I think I look at the final numbers, close to 500 people spread across 55 jurisdictions. So just goes to show, you know, we can get out there in the voice and certainly the podcast and the you know, YouTube and all these things help us have that conversation at scale with expats and just help you guys keep fully informed. So once again, if you love the work we're doing, you know, give us a like, give us a thumbs up, give us a review on podcast channels. You know, all these things help us just get information out there and, you know, touch the four corners of the world.
That's right. All right, mate. Well, thanks for your time again, as always.
Pleasure, mate. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Sounds good. See you, Brett. Bye.
Thanks, mate.